I was at the biggest youth tournament of the year, Junior Gold, the entire last week throughout all days of qualifying. I'm going to go over what worked and what didn't work for all these youth bowlers throughout qualifying. And spoiler alert, that one kind of ball that USBC's looking to maybe get rid of was thrown a lot this last week.
The first pattern I watched was 36 feet, 28 mils at Riviera Lanes. This center has a lot of built-in friction on the gutter and in the front part of the lane. This causes a lot of balls to easily bounce off of the first few boards and create some higher scores. This center's characteristics, with a lot of friction on the gutter from the oil pattern, allowed very high scores and a lot of urethane balls across the center. Despite the high scores, you still had to make decent shots and also play the lanes correctly. But once you got in the right spot, your misses kind of funneled to the pocket, and it was pretty easy to throw some strikes. It seemed like the people who could get a little bit closer to the gutter scored a little bit better. Because this center's gutter plays so good and the pattern also calls for it, higher ball speeds and lower rev rates seem to work pretty well to stay on the gutter for a few extra games and get a little bit more score throughout all 4 games of the qualifying block. There was definitely still some score with people swinging the purple hammer a little bit more, but you could run into a little bit more trouble and your misses could be magnified depending on what pair you hit and or who you're following. The thing with these short patterns is a lot of people can strike in practice, and a lot of people can even strike the first game, but managing the transition is very difficult sometimes. Because a lot of urethane balls go down the lanes transition very quickly, and it's important to not only make moves with your feet, but moves with your hand, rev rate, and speed to match what the lane is giving you. I saw a lot of people make small moves left or right if their ball wasn't doing the right thing and move into either a lot more friction if they moved right, or their ball never saw it down lane because there's a ton of oil carried down. That's why a lot of these moves can be a little bit tricky, because when you move right, you have to throw them a little bit faster to get them through the front part of the lane that's been burnt up, or if you want to move left, you have to throw it slower most of the time. Overall, a lot of people seem to figure out this pattern because a lot of youth bowlers are really good at throwing urethane and they're comfortable doing it, so a lot of score came out of this house. The second pattern was 39 feet, 27 mils at Rolling Thunder Lanes. That means this pattern was 3 feet longer and 1 less milliliter of oil. Because of the different length, pattern structure, and center, there was a little bit less free hook on the gutter. You could still get it right and get it to the first few boards, but you had to be a little bit straighter through the front part of the lane. There was also a little bit more opportunity to move a little bit further left and keep them a little bit straighter in front of you. Most people on the first pattern at Riviera played around the same spot. I saw a lot of people playing all over the lane on this pattern, and that can cause the lanes to transition a little more inconsistently. This is one of those patterns that can produce a lot of score if you're doing the right thing or you hit the right pairs, but if you're not paying attention or not doing the right thing with your hand, ball speed, and rev rate, it can be very confusing and kind of tough. Another factor I attribute them being a little bit tougher to sometimes is because a lot of people want to throw urethane balls that have a very strong surface on them at a center that hooks just as much as the first center, and we have slightly less oil across a longer distance. That means there's less oil in the fronts for your ball to stay on line, so if you're in the wrong part of the lane, your ball can get offline very quickly and split a lot very quickly. The name of the game on this pattern was throw urethane again, but there was a little bit more variability on where you could throw it, and you could move a little bit further left and keep them a little bit closer in front of you if you wanted to because of how the pattern was designed. Overall, the scores were a little bit lower than from Riviera, but from the people who figured out, they threw a lot of strikes and put up a lot of score in this house. The third center was 46 feet, 26 mils at Saber Lanes. This pattern was definitely the outlier. There was practically no urethane thrown on this pattern, and the ones that did go down the lane didn't see a lot of score. Since this pattern length is so much longer, you have to keep your ball a lot closer to the head pin, but since the amount of oil is pretty similar and it's just spread out over a longer distance, there's actually substantially less oil in the front part of the lane, which causes urethane balls to get offline and even some of the bigger reactive balls to get offline. This causes a lot of people to get very confused and split a lot, very quickly and very often. The solution to these patterns is to move left and get into the oil you can. I saw a lot of people get their ball through around 20 at the arrows to 10 down lane, and that seemed to work really good. It allows the ball to get through the front speeds. You're setting it down in more oil by sliding further left, and it allows your ball to stay close enough to the head pin to hook back most of the time. Some people with lower rev rates had to slide a little bit further right or not get it as far right down lane, but if you slid a little bit too far right, like up 10 or 15, you could run into a little bit trouble with the pattern being really flat and seeing a lot of early friction. The main way to score on a pattern like this is to have a very strong core so you have the hook potential to get it to move down lane, but a little bit of a cleaner cover stock so the ball doesn't hook immediately and get offline. When looking at the pattern, you can see that there's a long, dark strip of oil in the middle of the lane going from board 15 to 15, and that's why we're trying to send it through about the 10 board down lane, because that will get the ball going through the corner of that block of oil, which allows you to have a little bit more oil left of you and a little bit more friction right of you. There's not a ton of room on this pattern, but it can create a little bit of miss room and allow you to have a little bit score on one of the harder houses everyone bowled at. The scores were definitely a ton lower here. A lot of youth bowlers don't like moving left, and they don't like keeping their angles in front of them, and they especially don't like throwing reactive a lot of the time. This pattern took a lot more touch at the bottom of the swing so you could get the ball through the fronts and still get it to move down lane. This was definitely a tricky pattern, and the people who scored very well on this pattern showed a lot of versatility and showed that they can do a lot more than just throw urethane. Throwing urethane is a very valuable skill, but the people who could conquer this pattern made up a lot of pins on the field. The final pattern was 44 feet, 29 milliliters at Rev's Bowling Alley. With this pattern, we have a little bit more oil in the front of the lane and a lot less hook overall because it's a longer pattern. This pattern seemed to be a little bit more scoreable than Saber overall for people, but definitely was still a lot trickier than some of the other short patterns. As always, a lot of people threw urethane, which means a lot of purple hammers going down the lane. This made the front of the lane hook a lot from further right and cause a bit of carry down early. On a pattern like this, when the fronts start to go away and there's a bit of carry down, you're going to want to move left. But because it's a little bit longer, you can have a little bit of a tough time getting your ball to hook. That's why in this pattern I saw a few people try to go reactive and try to get a little bit more hook potential and keep their angle straight through the fronts, closer to the track around second or third arrow. A lot of people did throw urethane and a lot of people did play straighter for the first few games, but as the fronts went away, you had to get left and you couldn't send them right. The pairs that people developed from straighter created a little bit friction right, had some forgiveness, but the pairs people moved quickly left with urethane didn't really develop great and ended up having a lot of hang to the right and a lot of hook in the middle of the lane. Overall, the plan of this pattern was just hit the pocket and don't give them away a ton. You don't want your ball to burn up too early, or just hang a ton down lane, and creating a bunch of angle through the fronts will make your ball do that sometimes. So I saw even with reactive or urethane, just straight through the fronts, feeding the ball to maybe 7 to 8 down lane was pretty good. Although the scores were a little bit lower than the short patterns, they were definitely a little bit higher than Saber, and a few people got out of this house with a bit of score.
Now that I've shown you all 4 days of qualifying, I've shown you a lot of strikes and a lot of strikes with urethane balls. I'd be curious your guys' opinion on what equipment was used and what patterns were chosen. Everyone has an opinion on kind of how this event is run, and I'd be curious to hear your guys' on how this year was run and everything like that. I'm from Wisconsin, so I'm really glad that I was able to watch everything, and I'm really grateful to watch all these youth bowlers learn and grow from this event. If you want to see other things in the future, subscribe and let me know in the comments what you want to see. So see you in the next video, and peace.